Okay, for this week's YouTube chat, we're going to look at the recent Emerging Ireland three-match tour of South Africa, where they competed in the Toyota Challenge, earning 3 wins, 36-24 over the Pumas, 29-24 over the Western Force, and finally 33-24 against the Cheetahs. But as ever with these tours, it's not so much about the results, rather what we learned from the matches and which players actually did seem to emerge as possible candidates for the full test side. Starting with yourself, Hugo, what did you make of the series?
Yeah, I thought it was a really enjoyable tour, and I thought, all things considered, it's been very positive few couple of weeks. A really great showcase of young talent. I think it's easy to forget sometimes just how young some of these players are, but the average age of the squad that turned out for the final game against the Cheetahs was 20. There were only three players over the age of 23 in the side. And while I think there were very valid concerns going into this about provinces losing key players for what is ultimately a development tour in the middle of a season, and I think those concerns are very legitimate. And I think Ulster in particular probably can point to some of those missing players as being reason why maybe they didn't come away with at least an extra bonus point or two from the recent South Africa tour. But I think there were some really great positives to take, some really good results against some really decent teams. I think uh, just because they're not necessarily playing in the URC doesn't mean that for the last couple of weeks, Emerging Ireland have been playing no hopers. The Cheetahs reached the semi-finals of the Curry Cup this year. The Pumas won it a couple of years ago. Western Force, for all their recent troubles, are a Super Rugby Pacific side. And Emerging Ireland went, and having played together having trained together for at most a few days before that first game, won all of them, and put in some pretty impressive rugby. Some of that attacking play was pretty incredible. And while the defense didn't always click, actually it clicked pretty well for some guys who really hadn't, you know, been together very long. Um, Obviously, kind of bigger challenges to come. Not everyone who will go in this tour will necessarily be playing for Ireland one day. But I think there's a few people who did really put their hand up. I thought Alex Condellan was brilliant. In the two games he played, came in as captain, missed the 2022 tour because he got a concussion shortly before it. And I thought he was brilliant, particularly in that second game against Western Force, where Emerging on were under, having jumped out to a big lead, actually under a lot of pressure, especially in that second half. And some of Kendall's work at the breakdown was very impressive. His mobility, again, because he's been around for quite a long time, because he went into the Munster setup very young. Again, it's easy to forget the guy's still only 23, a lot more still to come from him. And I do think it's interesting that Kendall was picked not just to go on this tour, but to captain it. Hodnett, for example, who many people would say has been the kind of the next seven up after Van der Fleer, who notably hasn't been called into the Ireland side, or at least hasn't been given a cap over the last couple of years. But Kendall is a player more in the Van der Fleer mold, that very kind of mobile sort of open side. And I do wonder whether the fact that Kendall has been brought on this, the fact that he's been given the captaincy, and particularly given the performances he's put in, I do wonder whether that indicates something about Farrell's thinking going into the autumn internationals. Um, kind of, we obviously knew Kendall was a really good player. I think the other player who, which kind of my surprise find of the tour, Alex Usnov, who only went on the tour in the first place because Jordan Duggan got injured in the week beforehand. Usnov started most games in the under 26 nations this year, but has never actually played a senior game for Leinster. Not someone who I think there was necessarily a huge amount of buzz around going into the tour. I thought he was brilliant. Played in all three games. Started the final two. Really part of what was a really impressive Emerging Ireland front row, actually, against again some very big experienced scrummagers over the last couple of weeks. And so it held up really well in the scrum, held up really well around the park. Some of his passing, a lovely little 1-2 between him and Jack Ainger in the build up to one of our tries against Cheetahs. So especially given Ireland's issues in finding depth at loosehead, and Leinster's, hopefully we are growing our depth there, but it is another very promising young player who looks to be holding their hand up. And I think for Usmanov, this could be a very important career step in his career, in the sense of getting a chance to show what he can do early on, and whether that changes Leo Cullen's thinking over the next few months will be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean the thing about this series is that, like, as you say, like the matches were far from easy. There were really good sides putting up against them. You had the Pumas in the first game, who are not great defensively, but they're capable of scoring in the blink of an eye, and they were, if you give them half a chance. And then, as you say, Western Force did a comeback as well. They had to work hard, and then with the Cheetahs in the final game, we all know how well I mean, the Cheetahs are like, you'd love to see them to find a way to get them into the URC. And they're a great side with a great history themselves. And but they had done their homework in this game, and they were really going for it. I mean, it was a home match for them, I suppose, is in a way. So they wanted to perform in front of their fans. And but they were going, they were picking and going from every breakdown when they knew we were fanning out, and they were really putting it to us up the middle. And they gave us a problem that we had to solve. And it was a real challenge over the 80 minutes for us to, and they managed to do that, and they came out on top in all three games. So it's a really good experience. Who stood out for you, David?
For me, I think it's a nice little party here. I just realized Hugo takes the forwards, I take the backs. He's the man of substance. I just like the flash. For me, I think in the fullback line, it's a young fellow who had a very good season. I think it just last season with the under-20s was Ben O'Connor. He's a young Munster fullback. He just seems like a really seeing him out on the pitch in the first place. Immediately, my first thought was he doesn't immediately look like a professional player, which is fair. He's still basically a child, but he's able to pick these lines of running. He's one of the first people I've seen who seems to have this eye for the backfield, almost like, I don't know if he's ever played at 10, but he has the same kind of eye for backfield and grubbers through and just kind of creating space, as you would tend to see from a Jack Crowley or from a Kieran Frawley. He has that same kind of eye for space to get that kind of presence in your fullback role, as well as he's a big man. He's tall, he's fast, he's strong, he's able to carry, he's able to pass. But the vision that he displayed in the performances that I saw of him gave me the impression that this is a young lad who will be able to offer a lot to Munster in the years to come. But I think if you're going to look at this tour, I thought it's a very interesting concept as a tour overall, particularly the timing. Obviously, Toyota themselves sponsor it, so there's no water off the IRFU's back, and that's why it makes as much sense as it does. This tour felt a lot closer than the last one. I think probably because we swapped out. I think it was the Griquas in the previous one who didn't put up much of a fight for the Western Force, who gave us a much stronger showing, and it felt like a lot more of a contest, particularly the compact nature of the tour. But that compact nature also really, really showed that, I think, in the minds of certainly some of the Ireland coaches, one of their driving purposes behind this tour, I think if you had to put one name to it, that one name was Sam Prendergast. I think he started all three games, which is impressive for anybody to start three rugby matches that close together. And he wasn't at 100% in all three of them, particularly by the end of the tour. You probably see that he started to tire, but this seemed like his audition. And I mean, it seems very clear to anyone watching this. Last season he had a great run out with Leinster. He ended up starting a lot more games because of injuries to Ross Byrne. And I think it's fairly clear that this tour was very much the Sam Prendergast auditional tape. And it's becoming a pattern now between Emerging Ireland and the Ireland national squad again, with the national coaches pushing down to the provincial coaches, and particularly pushing down to Leo Cullen and saying, we like the look of this guy. We'd really like to see more of him in this position. And I think if this tour alone, I think the 2022 tour, the main three names we got out of that were Jack Crowley, Calvin Nash, and Joe McCarthy. If we can get three more players like that out of this tour, and even just some more who are just set up to kind of grow out of it, it'll be worth it. But if we're looking at three names 2 years from now that we're looking back on, I think Sam Prendergast is definitely going to be one of them. And we could be in a situation where one of the players Hugo mentioned, Usanov, who I believe only turned 19 in July. Like, this is how young some of these fellas are. So from that point of view, I think this tour almost felt like, with a couple of older heads in there, Rob Russell, while not being older, obviously has quite a lot of caps and quite a lot of tries for Leinster. It almost felt like an under 20s part two kind of tour of South Africa. And given how well the provinces, obviously Ulster had a tough time down in South Africa, but I think the other provinces handled the loss quite well, and certainly when it came to the matchups in the Aviva Stadium and up in Kingspan, it forced the provinces to play their frontline players, probably slightly earlier than the season than we would have expected. I think overall, I don't think there's any way to look at this tour and its impacts both provincially and nationally, but positively.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we mentioned how like this tour was unfortunate for the provinces, which does make sense. I mean, the URC, we've talked a lot of time how crucial every point you get is come the end of the season for placings and stuff. But like you say, I mean, Toyota come up with a competition. They offer it. They offer it to Ireland. Is do you take it or do you don't? And you know, I think it made sense. I think it made sense to go with it when you weighed all the options. And I think all the provinces. I mean, you mentioned players. I think all 4 provinces have come out of this with they've been able to play their matches, and they've mostly been good results for the 4 provinces over the past few weeks. Yeah, go on, David.
And they showed leeway as well. I think that was a concern certainly with the last tour, and I don't know that it came up in the last tour. I don't remember, but in this tour, when push came to shove and the provinces had need, there was give. You know, Gus McCarthy was able to come back home. Sean O'Brien was able to come back.
If
You
there
know,
was a problem back at home,
if there was a problem, there was leeway given there. You know, I think it was a 33-man squad sent down there, so there was a little bit of give, and I think that showed that at the very least, while the national squad or the national team wanted to have this tour go on, they were absolutely willing to work with the provinces where necessary.
Yeah, absolutely, but plus we also got to see game time for. I mean, we've spoken about Sam Prendergast had a good tour. We got James Gohan did well. We had a couple of Soroka did well off the bench. We got some good game time from them. Sam Prendergast and Cormac Foley got to start together. I think Foley went off. Did he go off injured in that last game or something?
He went off, I think he went off. Divine came. Divine came back on.
So hope he's okay. But they got at the same time as we had Frawley and Gibson Park started together. You got those 2 getting game time together at the same time. So that was good for Leinster. But the other provinces as well. I mean, Ulster, you saw Zach Ward playing on the wing. I think he got the first try in the first game for Ireland. And it's after you've seen how well he did for the Sevens, it'd be interesting to see him on the wing. He's got that carrying power and stuff. And it'd be interesting to see him play in the wing. And they had Postlethwaite as well. I think he got in the tries as well in the forwards. You had Munster. You've spoken about Ben O'Connor, Alex Candellin. They got game time. Candellin got to lead the squad. He's got some leadership, qualities there. He was captain of the under-20s as well before. And of course, Connacht, Hugh Gavin, he was a player of the match in that last game as well. He was flying in the center there, especially in that game in particular. But so there's some great performances for all the provinces. So there were positives throughout, and it has to be a net positive for Irish rugby that this tour took place. Like again, 3 games Wednesday, what was it? Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday. That was definitely a tight schedule, especially when you got Sam starting all 3. But at the end of the day, they travel, and like it was a young squad. They get they're traveling together. They get Easterby spends time with them, and just putting on that green jersey and going out and playing. It was definitely a positive. So it'd be interesting to see how we reach. I mean, in the past, we had the Churchill Cup way back in the day, if you remember that, and that was gone, and we don't have things like that now for this. So it's good to have this every year, even if it is in an awkward time of the season. So we'll see how it goes in the future.